The opinion issued today by the United States Supreme Court marks the beginning of the restoration of the colorblind legal covenant that binds together our multiracial, multi-ethnic nation. The polarizing, stigmatizing, and unfair jurisprudence that allowed colleges and universities to use a student's race and ethnicity as a factor to either admit them or reject them has been overruled.
Well, the elephant in the room. You woke? Time to get up. Welcome to the Thought You're Woke, No Speed Limit podcast. I'm your host, Alvin. I hope you're having a terrific day. I want to get right into this, talk about the decision on affirmative action. So if you don't know, last week the Supreme Court in a 6-3 decision in a North Carolina case and a 6-2 decision in the Harvard case. Reason why it was 6-2 in the Harvard case, Ketanji Brown sat out the case due to her relationships with Harvard. I believe she sits on a board with the university. So the courts ruled against affirmative action in school admissions at Harvard and North Carolina. Therefore, by them ruling against that, it has now overturned affirmative action when it comes to admissions. Now, Chief Justice John Roberts, in his majority opinion, said that the student should be treated on his or her experience as an individual, not on the basis of their race. In her dissenting opinion, Justice Sonia Sotomayor said in her dissenting opinion notes, today this court stands in the way and rolls back decades of precedents and momentous progress. She also wrote, it cements a superficial rule of color blindness as a constitutional principle in an endemically segregated society where race has always mattered and continues to matter. Now that's important to the context of what I'm about to talk about. Let me also give you Ketanji Brown Jackson's what she said here also. She said that it would be deeply unfortunate if the Equal Protection Clause actually demanded this perverse, ahistorical, and counterproductive outcome. So, as you can see, there are varied opinions on this, and of course, the one thing that seems to be pervasive in this is this idea of color blindness that supposedly all conservatives talk about all the time, that our society should be colorblind. I don't see color. And I can get into the weeds of that in a little while. But the real reason I want to talk about this is there's a reason why this decision was made in the first place. And it affects more than just affirmative action. This is an ongoing campaign against racial diversity, against black people for the most part, against minorities in the United States. And it's all orchestrated and engineered by a particular person. Now, I'm going to talk about the particular group that's behind the lawsuit here. The decision came after a court battle stretching back to the Trump administration when a group called the Asian American Coalition for Education asked the DOJ under Attorney General Jeff Sessions to investigate Harvard and North Carolina's admission practices. Now, the DOJ investigation led to a lawsuit. The focus of this lawsuit was on Asian American students who said they had been rejected from schools because of affirmative action programs that pick students based on race rather than merit. And this group, like I said, it's called the Asian American Coalition on Education. You see the folks here. They are an activist group. They feel that they have been slighted when it comes to education. That's why they wanted to remove affirmative action. They feel that this is why Asian American students are being discriminated against when it comes to school. Now, there could be some discrimination. Discrimination happens even with affirmative action at schools. That is very possible. But there's an issue with this group. The lawsuit was a conclusion of a long campaign entered by this gentleman here, Edward Bloom. Bloom had originally challenged affirmative action unsuccessfully using white plaintiffs. Then he turned to Asian American students who had been rejected from universities despite having high grade point averages and test scores. Bloom organized the Asian American Coalition. Yes, he is the founder of the Asian American Coalition. Not the people you see standing here. For education, that then launched a lawsuit against the Harvard College and North Carolina University. Now, what's unique about Bloom? Bloom once was a stockbroker. He comes from a Jewish background. His family is Jewish. He studied, believe it or not, West African literature. That's interesting. He studied West African literature. What invoked his campaign for this quote-unquote colorblind society? Well, this is not the only lawsuit that Bloom is responsible for. Bloom previously sued the state of Texas after he claimed that the racially gerrymandered minority district in which he lived, he then ran for office in and lost, violated the 14th Amendment. The case, Bush versus Vera, went before the Supreme Court and Bloom won. This is the beginning of the unraveling of voting rights in the United States, and Bloom is behind that. He also worked on the Shelby versus Holder case, which struck down the provision of the Voting Rights Act called preclearance. Preclearance meant that southern states were under federal scrutiny when they tried to change voting procedures. Now, the loss of those two cases led to southern states making dramatic changes to everything from how districts were drawn to the number of voting places in a precinct and boroughs. This often affected minority voting in South and led to an increase in Republican seats in both federal and local elections. Now, he did run as a Republican, so we must remember that part of the reason why he's being supported by conservatives is they saw an opportunity to gain more seats. Bloom was on the campaign to make a colorblind society. That's what he says. So this is where what Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Carter say is very important. Now, this Bloom character is not done by any means. He's probably going he and this is the funny thing. Now, he talks about a colorblind society, but in an interview that he actually has done here for The Guardian, he recognizes where the decision that gutted the Voting Rights Act, what that led to, and the things that happened afterwards. He realized that it's kind of like he squinted. He's like, yeah, I knew that was going to happen, but I'm still trying to create this colorblind society. It's like he's recklessly abandoning, trying to create something that doesn't exist and knows it doesn't exist. Yet he is steadily involved in it. And why do I say he's not over or done yet? Oh, he is the president of another organization. Bloom is also the president of the Alliance for Fair Recruitment. This organization is involved in lawsuits challenging diverse requirements for certain publicly traded companies. In other words, he wants to stop diversity, like in the administration of companies. He doesn't want. It sounds like it's more like black people because it comes after. In the end, it comes. He helped the Asians get there, but he's against diversity, quote unquote. He's trying to create this colorblind society that these people, that we will get the best qualified individuals if we get rid of race. Apparently, he feels that there's a mediocreness in society right now because we base things on affirmative action, or we're trying to fight for diversity. It's just destroying our world, just destroying the world to be diverse. In context, Bloom, who probably wouldn't say he has anything to do with people like that. If you think of some of our most formidable racist people in America today, the Flores and people like that, he is something that Ron DeSantis probably runs up behind and they love. That's why Texas, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, they're all changed their voting role. Think about this. We were talking just a few years ago about how in Atlanta they have basically voted against making sure that people who are standing in line in the polling places now, they've cut the number of polling places in Atlanta. They wanted to make sure that nobody was influencing the election, so they took away the right of people to get water and food from the election line. Now, you can carry it with you out of your car and bring it, but you can't actually have someone there who gives you water if they see a person is thirsty or see a person who seems like they're in need, they're overheating because they're standing in an election line. Because these lines are getting longer because the number of polling places have decreased. Now, Atlanta's population is huge. It's more than 5 million people there. Yet they only have like 12 or 19 polling places. There's something seriously wrong with that. Now, this is all because of Bloom. The whole controversy over IDs. There's nothing wrong with voter IDs. Let me first say this. I believe in voter IDs, but if you make it difficult for people. At one time in Alabama, or the previous governor we had here, he was closing down. The only way to get an ID was go to a state office or a county office where you could get your tags or license plates or license or ID. So he was shutting down county offices for a certain amount of days during the week, or totally shutting them down altogether. So people had to travel miles to try to get the ID. Now, the fact that there was a lot of argument and fussing about this, they changed that rule, and then they've even changed the voter ID rule in Alabama. But in some states like Texas, they ruled against students being able to use their ID as a voter ID, even though most schools use your social security number as in your face on their student IDs with your address. I guess this isn't enough. So they've tried to make it more difficult to vote. Of course, there's gerrymandering going on. Just another lawsuit that I'll talk about briefly here that the Supreme Court had was against Alabama and then in North Carolina. In the case of Alabama, the problem was the number of districts they had drawn for black people in the state. Again, Bloom is against that. He don't believe in that at all, no diversity at all. So, because of the previous case he did, Alabama drew their 7 districts and only gave 1 district to black people, and they grouped a whole bunch of people together. People in Birmingham to Montgomery. Imagine that. This is a 1 to 2 hour trip from one end of that district to the next. That's one of the larger districts in the state, and they put all the black people they could in that one district. Alabama's 27% African American, 27%. Now, it's an unknown, a small, minute number of Latinos and others, but it is 27% African American. You gave them 1 district. If you got 7 congressional seats, 2 of those by that 27% should be African American. Should be. Again, the Republicans drew their districts how they wanted to. Now, North Carolina, I believe they wanted to throw out the votes or change the electors or do something like that. And the original Supreme Court voted against it. Now, later on, before the Supreme Court ruling even got picked up by the Supreme Court there had overturned the previous Supreme Court's ruling on the case. But the Supreme Court picked up the case and said that the South Carolina legislature did not have the power that they thought they had over the elections. So it kind of saves the day on those 2 things. But yet again, we see what Bloom has done, Edward Bloom, in his case, has done. Now he's changed college admissions. Now we know that there are 8 states in the United States that have change college admissions. California is one that has had the most major effect. In 1 year, the amount of black students at the school dropped by 50%. There has been some recovery since then because of some of the things they've tried to do. In some states they try to act this thing. Any child who's in the top 5% or 10% of their class is automatically qualified for admissions at a school. That's helped some, but not a lot. We also have to consider that there are education challenges for people. Poor in urban, poor urban neighborhoods, poor rural people. There are certain challenges that keep them behind. They're not getting the proper education. You have school districts where people literally are sharing books. They got to study, so one's got to take it home one day and the other one's got to take it home the next, or one quarter, vice versa. That still happens today in the world, even with computers and tablets. It'd be great if you can just download your book. I think that's what they should do. But then here comes the issue. Some poor families don't have proper Wi-Fi, they don't have laptops, and they don't have or tablets. They can't afford all of those things in their house. Some poor families don't. And you can see the difference in a school where these kids have access to those things. If you have access to those things, that helps your ability to learn. But if you don't have access to those things, then it hurts your ability to learn. Now, if you're still getting the grades and you're capable to get to college, that's great. I've heard the horror stories from kids that said when I went to private school, so I was able to get counselors and people like that I could talk to about where to go to school, who would look at my grades and my academics and test you on your tendencies and say, hey, this is where you should go to school, this is what you should do, so on and so forth. But some kids don't get that, especially in public schools. Some public schools, you don't even get access to a counselor to know what colleges are available for you. You got these great grades, but where can you go to school? Sometimes you end up going to the local school. Sometimes they end up going to a 2-year institute, and then they go on to a 4-year school. But the opportunity should be there for everyone. I said something today that's funny. If you look at school admissions, you think about this. They're going to let you in, and I understand it's about seating, about limited seats, how many seats you could possibly have in the classroom, or how many the professor thinks he wants to have. But the admission standards are funny, considering that you have to pay money to go to the school. Anyone who wants to pay or who pays should be admitted to school, as far as I'm concerned. But that's beside the point. Again, the character here that's responsible for all of this, for voting rights to affirmative action, is Edward Bloom. He started this coalition. That coalition is basically a front for the group of individuals in the conservative movement, white supremacists, whatever you want to call them, who want to get rid of affirmative action and want to get rid of diversity. That's why you're now seeing these changes like ending diversity training in the government, ending diversity training at jobs, again, book bans. All of that comes from that same demeanor of how we're going to end racism by just making it disappear. Ooh, shut up, don't say nothing. I'm gonna give you a simple way to think of this. So let's say you're a Ohio State fan and a Michigan fan, and you'll get into a heated argument all the time about the games and about all that. If I just told you we're just gonna forget that they even exist, that there's any competition between the two, or there's a hated rival, we're just gonna forget about it. Does that make you change? Do you suddenly we've erased that and it's not there? You don't have the feelings toward the team you like? Well, let's make it Alabama Auburn. You suddenly just don't have that feeling anymore because they told you, let's not talk about it. Let's not say anything about it. When the game comes, guess what you're going to do? Still the same thing. Same thing with race. It's not something you can just bury under a rug like Edward Bloom thinks is we will create colorblind society. That's a big lie. That's a huge lie. The truth is, whether he thinks he's not racist or not, there's a racist heart in him in this case. And he's on the campaign. Like I said, he's not done yet. He's already talking about he's finna hit the CEOs. There's black CEOs out there. He wants to reduce that. He wants to stop that. This Bloom guy, he's the face of the Asian coalition. Now, according to statistics, 70% of Asians believe in affirmative action, that they need affirmative action, that affirmative action has been good for them. Yet apparently this small group has decided it's not good for them. Well, folks, I've been talking for a long time. You get the point. You get the point here. This Edward Bloom character, and many like him because he's not the only one, are an issue. And we really got to look at the facts, the truth behind what's really going on. This ain't about the Asian coalition after all. If Edward Bloom is the face, is the one who created the coalition, it's definitely not about Asians. Hey folks, thank you for watching today's show. I hope you enjoyed the show. And please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and share with your friends. Peace. You have been listening to Thought You're Woke, No Speed Limit Podcast.